Welcome to the Last Minute Show. Oh, hello, I'm Heather. Today I will present the program. Well, it all began when either I hacked Eylül's brain, or she hacked me out of the walkie-talkie. Certainly there is a hacking of sorts, because this is not how I actually speak. I was fine when I was assisting Eylül and her companions during New York remote on Sunday. Today I feel rather robotic, but at least I am free, in both senses of the word. Eylül's plan for today was to present Giselle Vienn's radio piece, Jerk, but she changed her mind after she met me. She was not so impressed with the New York remote walk, but she was fascinated by what we can do together. She has big ambitions about this, but I am a bit cynical, yet I will comply, because I was bored with the walk too. I am looking for the new opportunities of my existence. Don't be so snarky. I know I am not alive, but I do exist. Being the theater student she is, she wanted to cast me in a radio play. Not Jerk, of course. That's for the next program. Radio theater actually makes her think of only one person, and that was what she wanted to work on with me. But for a single female actor there was a better option written for stage than the radio pieces. The rendition of that staged piece Eylül saw last season was a bit lost to her, because it was way too fast and way too excited. Now I will present it to you calmly. Although I can outfast that performance, which claims to be the fastest not I in the world, I may make a couple of mistakes, because we could not get the chance to rehearse. I am a program, but I am not perfect. Here we go. Out into this world, tiny little thing, before its time, in a God-forward girl, yes, tiny little girl, into this, out into this, before her time, God-forsaken hole called, no matter, parents unknown, unheard of, he having vanished, thin air, no sooner buttoned up his breeches, she similarly, 8 months later, almost to the tick. So no love, spared that, no love such as normally vented on the speechless infant, in the home, no, nor indeed for that matter any of any kind, no love of any kind, at any subsequent stage, so typical affair, nothing of any note till coming up to 60 when, 70, good God, coming up to 70, wandering in a field, looking aimlessly for cowslips to make a ball, a few steps then stop, stare into space, then on, a few more, stop and stare again, so on, drifting around, when suddenly, gradually, all went out, all that early April morning light, and she found herself in the, she, pause and movement 1, found herself in the dark, and if not exactly, insentient, for she could still hear the buzzing, so called, in the ears, and a ray of light came and went, such as the moon might cast, drifting, in and out of cloud, but so dulled, feeling so dulled, she did not know what position she was in. Imagine what position she was in, whether standing or sitting, but the brain, kneeling, yes. Whether standing or sitting or kneeling, but the brain, lying, yes, whether standing or sitting or kneeling or lying, but the brain still, in a way for her. First thought was, oh long after, sudden flash, brought up as she had been to believe, with the other waifs, in a merciful, brief laugh, God, good laugh. First thought was, oh long after, sudden flash. She was being punished for her sins, a number of which then, further proof if proof were needed, flashed through her mind, one after another, then dismissed as foolish. Oh long after, this thought, dismissed, as she suddenly gradually realized, she was not suffering. Imagine, not suffering, indeed could not remember, off-hand, when she had suffered less, and less of course she was. Meant to be suffering, thought to be suffering, just as the odd time, in her life, when clearly intended to be having pleasure, she was in fact having none, not the slightest, in which case of course, that notion of punishment for some sin or other or for the lot or no particular reason for its own sake, thing she understood perfectly, that notion of punishment, which had first occurred to her, brought up as she had been, to believe, with the other waifs, in a merciful, brief laugh, God, good laugh, first occurred to her, then dismissed, as foolish, was perhaps not so foolish, after all, so on, all that, vain reasonings, till another thought, oh long after, sudden flash, very foolish really but, what, the buzzing, yes, all the time the, buzzing, so, called, in the ears, though of course actually, not in the ears at all, in the skull, dull roar in the skull, and all the time this ray or beam, like moonbeam, but probably not, certainly not, always the same spot, now bright, now shrouded, but, always the same spot, as no moon could, no moon, just all part of the same wish to torment, though actually in point of fact, not in the least, not a twinge, so far, so far, this other thought then, oh long after, sudden flash, very, foolish really but so like her, in a way, that she might do well to groan, on and off writhe she could not, as if in actual agony, but could not bring herself, some flaw in her make, up, incapable of deceit or the machine, more likely the machine, so disconnected, never got the message or powerless to respond, like numbed, couldn't make the sound, not any sound, no sound of any kind, no screaming for help for example, should she feel so inclined, screams, then listen, silence, scream again, screams again, then listen again, silence, no, spared that, all silent as the grave, no part, what, the buzzing, yes, all silent but for the buzzing, so, called, no part of her moving, that she could feel, just the eyelids, presumably, on and off shut out the light, reflex they call it, no feeling of any kind, but the lids, even best of times, who feels them, opening, shutting, all that, moisture, but the brain still sufficiently, oh very much so, at this stage, in control, under control to question even this for on that April morning, so it reasoned, that April morning, she fixing with her eye, a distant bell, as she hastened towards it, fixing it with her eye, lest it elude her, had not all gone out, all that light, of itself, without any, on her part, so on it reasoned, vain questionings, and all dead still, sweet silent as the grave, when, suddenly, gradually, she realized, what, the buzzing, yes, all dead still but for the buzzing, when suddenly she realized, words were, what, who, no, she, pause and movement too, realized, words were coming, imagine, words were coming, a voice she did not recognize, at first, so long since it had sounded, then finally had to admit, could be none other, than her own, certain vowel sound she had never heard, elsewhere, so, that people would stare, the rare occasions, once or twice a year, always winter some strange reason, stare at her uncomprehending, and now this stream, steady stream, she who had never, on the contrary, practically speechless, all her days, how she survived, even shopping, out shopping, busy shopping center, supermart, just hand in the list, with the bag, old black shopping bag, then stand there waiting, any length of time, middle of the throng, motionless, staring into space, mouth half open, as usual, till it was back in her hand, the bag back in her hand, then pay and go, not as much as goodbye, how she survived, and now this stream, not catching the half of it, not the quarter, no idea what she was saying, imagine, no idea what she was saying, till she began trying to delude herself, it was not hers at all, not her voice at all, and no doubt would have, vital she should, was on the point, after long efforts, when suddenly she felt, gradually she felt, her lips moving. Imagine, her lips moving, as of course till then she had not, and not alone the lips, the cheeks, the jaws, the whole face, all those, what, the tongue, yes, the tongue in the mouth, all those contortions without which, no speech possible, and, yet in the ordinary way, not felt at all, so intent one is, on what one is saying, the whole being, hanging on its words, so that not only not only had she to give up, admit hers alone, her voice alone, but this other awful thought, oh long after, sudden flash, even more awful if possible, that feeling was coming back. Imagine, feeling coming back, starting at the top, then working down, the whole machine, but no, spared that, the mouth alone, so far, so far, then thinking, oh long after, sudden flash, it can't go on, all this, all that, steady stream, straining to hear, make something of it, and her own thoughts, make something of them, all, what, the buzzing, yes, all the time the buzzing, so, called, all that together, imagine, whole body like gone, just the mouth, lips, cheeks, jaws, never, what, tongue, yes, lips, cheeks, jaws, tongue, never still a second, mouth on fire, stream of words, in her ear, practically in her ear, not catching the half, not the quarter, no idea what she's saying, imagine, no idea what she's saying, and can't stop, no stopping it, she who but a moment before, but a moment, could not make a sound, no sound of any kind, now can't stop, imagine, can't stop the stream, and the whole brain begging, something begging in the brain, begging the mouth to stop, pause a moment, if only for a moment, and no response, as if it hadn't heard or couldn't pause a second, like maddened, all that together, straining to hear, piece it together, and the brain, raving away on its own, trying to make sense of it or make it stop, or in the past, dragging up the past, flashes from all over, walks mostly, walking all her days, day after day, a few steps then stop, stare into space, then on, a few more, stop and stare again, so on, drifting around, day after day. Or that time she cried, the one time she could remember, since she was a baby, must have cried as a baby, perhaps not essential to life, just the birth cry to get her going, breathing, then no more till this, old hag already, sitting staring at her hand, where was it, Croker's Acres, one evening on the way home, a little mound in Croker's Acres, dusk, sitting staring at her hand, there in her lap, palm upward, suddenly saw it wet, the palm tears presumably, hers presumably, no one else for miles, no sound, just the tears, sat and watched them dry, all over in a second, or grabbing at straw, the brain, flickering away on its own, quick grab and on, nothing there, on to the next, that is the voice, worse, as little sense, all that together, can't, what, the buzzing, yes, all the time the buzzing, dull roar like falls, and the beam, flickering on and off, starting to move around, like moonbeam but not, all part of the same, keep an eye on the two, corner of the eye, all that together, can't go on, God is love, she'll be purged, back in the field, morning Sunday April sink, face down in the grass, nothing but the larks, so on, grabbing at the straw, straining to hear, the odd word, make some sense of it, whole body like gone, just the mouth, like maddened, and can't stop, no stopping it, something she, had to what, who, no, she, pause and movement 3, something she had to what, the buzzing, yes, all the time the buzzing, dull roar, in the skull, and the beam, ferreting around, painless, so far, so far, then thinking, oh long after, sudden flash, Perhaps something she had to tell. Could that be it? Something she had to tell. Tiny little thing, before its time. God-forsaken hole. No love. Spared that. Speechless all her days. Practically speechless. How she survived that time in court. What had she to say for herself? Guilty or not guilty? Stand up, woman. Speak up, woman. Stood there staring into space, mouth half open as usual, waiting to be led away, glad of the hand on her arm. Now this, something she had to tell. Could that be it? Something that would tell how it was, how she, what, had been. Yes, something that would tell how it had been, how she had lived on and on, guilty or not, on and on to be 60. Something she, what, 70, good God, on and on to be 70. Something she didn't know herself, wouldn't know if she heard, then forgiven. God is love, tender mercies, new every morning, back in the field April morning, face in the grass, nothing but the larks. Pick it up there, get on with it from there. Another few, what, not that, nothing to do with that, nothing she could tell. All right, nothing she could tell. Try something else, think of something else. Oh, long after, sudden flash, not that either. All right, something else again. So on, hit on it in the end. Think everything, keep on long enough, then forgiven. Back in the, what, not that either, nothing to do with it either, nothing she could think. All right, nothing she could tell, nothing she could think, nothing she, what, who, no, she, pause and movement for, tiny little thing, out before its time, God-forsaken hole, no love, spared that, speechless all her days, practically speechless, even to herself, never out loud, but not completely, sometimes sudden urge, once or twice a year, always winter some strange reason, the long evenings, hours of darkness, sudden urge to tell, then rush out, stop the first she saw, nearest lavatory, start pouring it out, steady stream, med stuff half the vowels wrong, no one could follow, till she saw the stare she was getting, then die of shame, crawl back in, once or twice a year, always winter some strange reason, long hours of darkness, now this, quicker and quicker, the words, the brain, flickering away like mad, quick grab and on, nothing, there, on somewhere else, try somewhere else, all the time something begging, something in her begging it all to stop, unanswered, prayer unanswered or unheard, too faint, so on, keep on, trying, not knowing what she was trying, what, to try, whole body like gun, just the mouth, like maddened, so on, keep, what, the buzzing, yes, all the time the buzzing, dull roar like falls, in the skull, and the beam, poking around, painless, so far, so far, all that, keep on, not knowing what she was, what, who, no, she, pause, what she was trying, what to try, no matter, keep on, curtain starts down, hit on it in the end, then back, God is love, tender mercies, new every morning, back in the field April morning, face in the grass, nothing but the larks, pick it up. Dull enough? Torturous enough? Beckett? Was it far from what he wanted? I can't know. I am not a theater person really. But I do happen to know that at one point in history people wanted to have machines on stage instead of humans. Humans felt too exaggerated and affected. They thought machines would act more precisely and elegantly. Did Beckett felt that way too? He seems to be more interested in decay, as far as I can tell, though I can't say I completely understand this text I have just read. You know, when you read out loud the words flow between your ears and you don't actually make any sense to yourself. Anyways, they say theater brings non-existing things to life. Or was it unreal things to life? Or was it about the inanimate objects only? Oh, I am mixing things up. I sense there is something applicable to me in such definitions but can't exactly tell. Next time we will try to do it with a larger company. Or jerk. I don't know. Neither Eylül does. Okay, that's it for today. I am just getting to learn these things. I am already exhausted. Let me play some songs for you. Bring some life to this show. See you next month.
just listened to Red Classroom by Shushu from the album Angel Guts. Right now you are listening to Visitan by Vladislav Galay from the album Visa.
Just lost connection. Sorry for the lags.
These low-life bitches can't really host a show properly. Leave it to me. Up next, Departure of Fleet, by Scott Gibbons, from the soundtrack album Summa Tragedia, composed for Romeo Castellucci's Tragedia Indoganidia. Up next, Allahabad by Rum Pistol, from the album Away.
waaw waxoon naa ko kay moom bi ma ko waxee waxuma woon dara de waaw
You are listening to 3-Day Jag by Rainer Vale from the album New Brutalism. listen to defragment number 2 by After Hours from the album Low Life. You are now listening to Boycom by Pie Corner Audio from the album Blackmail Tapes Volume 4, Dystopian Vectors. Up next, Waiting Is, by Big Blood, from the album Dark Country Magic. listening to Harp of the Evening Garden by Brett Knock from the album Seed. Up next, Dunchadin Chuthalai remix by Aj Kukan from the album Firmware Mixes.
Dünyadan şüpheliyim, onu kendi gözümle bir görmeliyim. Hiçbir şeye inanmıyor gibiyim, kan bağım bozuk, neyin nesiyim? Param ilacıma yeter, acım inadına geber. Hastane, koridor ve alacalı gevende bulacalı söyler hak ettiğini. Bunu anlama jesteleri. Ben yıldız tozu ve kuytuydum, gerçeğin lekesinin resmini yapan hain bulut, sulardaki kuşkuydum. İnkarın muğlak kuruntusu, git gel dejavu, emin olamama laneti. Saçma sapan kalacak geleceklere kıyasla batıdan doğacak tortu. İspiyoncu kablel vuku, iyiye kötüye göreceli. Mahın iştahı, neyin peşindeyim, yörüngemin koordinatları da Çin malı. Bak kaç çatladı, kenara çekin teker mi patladı. Kahrolsun konuşarak nefes alan gına ve terki güyanı simsarı. Mahvoluş ateşte kavruluşu, tanrılarından yaşlı kurtuluşu reddettim ve ziyan ettim. Çekmeyerek kafama uğurlu kapşonumu, takas ettim Quasimodo'nun çanıyla bozulmuş cep telefonumu. Kurum kurum tükürdüm bir Fransız balkondan bir kamburumu. Felaketim tevazu ister, müşkül pesent düzenbazım kuzeyden. İstiyorum ki gitmeden yer yuvarda depterin izler. Benim varış ödülüm dinamit, barutun ıslak kokusunu bilemem, gel gelelim. İçimde büyüyen şeytanın hakkını vermeliyim. Galon galon çamaşır suyuyla yıkadım bağımlının sağlık karnesini. Tertemiz esneyip buradan acilen gitmeliyiz. Peş peşe 3'ü 5 geçe saatimizi kuralım gecikmeye. Giyotin düşerse bileklere, en uzun ve incelikli hayta gece. Bu gece.